After my last iPad setup video, I started getting interested in other kinds of iPad setups. And the thing I've always been thinking about is all those ported AAA console games that Apple made a pretty big deal about starting back a couple years ago. Besides the base iPad, this iPad mini has the weakest internals in the current iPad lineup, so I wanted to see the least of what an iPad can game right now. iPadOS natively supports both Xbox and PlayStation controllers, so I personally use this old Xbox One wireless controller via Bluetooth, and it works perfectly with full compatibility. And instead of a kickstand case, I actually recommend a magnetic stand like this with some height on it, so your neck doesn't have to tilt down as much, and it really helps a lot for long play sessions. I'll put an affiliate link for this or a similar Amazon alternative down below. That's basically all I use in terms of the setup, and I've been gaming on this setup for about 2 weeks like my little portable gaming console. So let me tell you about all my thoughts on the setup, including the games, the performance, and the general experience to see if your iPad could maybe not be your main gaming setup. Okay, so in terms of the games, it's an iPad in 2025, so we do have a ton of options. Of course, we have all your console imitation games like Call of Duty Mobile and Diablo Immortal. There are also ports of really old console games like GTA San Andreas, as well as fully compatible emulators now for much older gen consoles, which is really cool. There's also the cloud gaming option through services like Xbox Game Pass that lets you stream from a huge catalog of console games. But what we're really interested in for this video are the ports from current or recent generation consoles. In total, there's actually a lot to choose from, including the indies, and someone made a really helpful GitHub page listing a bunch of them. But if we're talking realistic graphics on recent AAA titles, we're pretty much limited to the Resident Evil remakes and the new ones like RE Village, a full-fledged Assassin's Creed game, and Hideo Kojima's Death Stranding. The upcoming Assassin's Creed Shadows game is also hinted to be coming to iPad as well, but besides that one, that's pretty much it for the publicly announced roadmap and the available games in general. While this space is very slowly growing, sales reportedly aren't that great, so it's unlikely to accelerate at any time soon. Apple's new game porting toolkit does make it a lot easier for game devs to port PC games to Mac, iPad, and iPhone, so there definitely is room to grow here, but I guess we'll learn more about that progress during this year's WWDC. Anyway, what I've been playing on here for the last 2 weeks have been Alien Isolation, Assassin's Creed Mirage, and a trial of Resident Evil Village. Alien Isolation came to iPad in 2021, Assassin's Creed Mirage in 2024, and RE Village in 2023. So it's been a good mixed testing of releases in the last 3 to 4 years. In terms of actual gameplay and performance, Alien Isolation is a really good console port. So in graphics mode, it seems to be locked at around 30 frames per second with very sluggish gameplay, but the performance mode with game mode turned on has virtually no drops in terms of graphics fidelity or texture and detail, and it runs at a super smooth and consistent 60 frames per second. I was about to be pretty disappointed while running this in graphics mode, so I was really surprised when the performance mode looked exactly the same, and this iPad handles this game at absolutely no problem. It also helps that this game is fairly slow and mostly very dark and indoor environments, so there aren't really complex shadows and reflections that the GPU needs to deal with. The UI also fully supports Xbox button icons. The game is optimized for the iPad's aspect ratio, so it's full screen. Even when the game is paused and not played or open for like 2 days, it stays as the way it is without even saving. So you can just resume back at any time, which I was super impressed with. Thermals were also really good. The iPad only got slightly warm and never enough to be hot or uncomfortable. So with all these things in mind, this game in general felt very native to the iPad, and I give the overall experience here a solid A. As for Assassin's Creed Mirage, it's definitely a different story. It's a much newer game with much more NPCs, more draw distance needed for an open world game, and brighter environments with lots of things going on with more details, dynamic shadows, reflections, and things like that. This is where we see the limits of the A17 Pro chipset. The Mini had a bunch of trouble rendering a lot of little details like hair and beard strands. There are jagged environmental textures everywhere. Character models look okay, but there are no details. This is the same at medium or high graphics settings, but I really don't recommend low settings since the characters' mouths don't even move when talking. Either way, the iPad gets pretty hot on the back, especially in the center and lower half, and the game is capped at 25 to 35 frames per second. So I do recommend using medium settings since you're getting better visuals than low, but slightly smoother gameplay than high settings. Overall, it looks decent enough, but is nowhere near as good as even a last gen console with so many little rendering issues. So I'm thinking that this chipset wasn't completely optimized to play this game. Maybe you'll see much better performance on a M series iPad. Then for Resident Evil Village, which was just a trial, but I got a good sense of the performance. The environments are darker, not as open world, and there is a ton of adjustments you can make to the graphics settings, more than any of the other games I touched here. It surprisingly ran super smoothly, even with high textures turned on with a fairly high resolution. With these settings, I'm getting a very consistent 60 frames per second with a few frame drops when rendering new environments. Hair strands still don't render that well, but the character models in general look great. You can play with the settings some more to get even better performance or better graphics, so that's cool cool you can have that control on an iPad game. It really doesn't get that warm either, not even close to as hot as Assassin's Creed Mirage. So yeah, overall this seems to be really well optimized. These slow horror games seem to play really well on iPad. I wouldn't recommend buying Assassin's Creed Mirage on iPad because it's really not that comparable to the console experience, but for Alien Isolation and the Resident Evil games, the graphics might still be a tier below the console counterparts, but the gameplay experience is very close. So I actually do think they would be worth buying and playing on here. Even if the games run perfectly well like these, battery life is definitely something you have to consider. I played all these games off the charger, just running on the battery. The runtime on your iPad will depend on your iPad model and the game you're playing, but for this iPad mini, it drained about 20 to 30% battery every hour or so. So you can get about 3 to 5 hours of gameplay with these AAA console ports, which is not bad at all and comparable to a Steam Deck OLED. It won't get you through a really long international flight, but it can more than entertain you enough during a domestic flight or a high-speed train trip. So putting everything together, gaming on an iPad like a console has actually been a pretty decent experience. Some of these games look and play really well with good consistency and great thermals. Some can be duds like Assassin's Creed Mirage, but with some optimizations, you can see the potential there for gaming on an iPad thanks to these latest A series or M series Apple Silicon chipsets. But with the very limited amount of AAA console ports available right now, I don't think it's worth investing into your iPad as your only gaming machine. Not yet at least. Once we see some better traction and a much more robust library, I think that would be a much better time to get into it. But if you do see a really good deal for one of these games on your iPad and you're feeling adventurous, I do recommend giving it a shot because it is a decent gaming experience. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe. It would really support the channel. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of iPad or iOS gaming and if you think there's any potential here in the near future. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys on the next video.